everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Obsessed with Pickleball podcast. Please like and subscribe and follow me on Instagram, Obsessed with Pickleball. I have a lot to chat about today. Even though we didn't have a PPA tournament this weekend, there is still lots to discuss. It was actually the perfect weekend not to have a tournament to watch because the NCAA playoffs have been crazy. Go UConn. Women's basketball is just extremely elite right now. And if you're not watching, I don't know what you're doing. UConn is playing lights out. Juju is on a mission. South Carolina. I mean, there's too many amazing teams to even think about or talk about. But that is for another podcast. Another sports podcast can talk about basketball. I also was able to finish Severance this weekend. And I'm late to the game on Severance, but I saw the finale. And I watched all the TikTok, theories about it. Because honestly, I didn't really get it until the TikTok people explained to me what was going on. So thank you to everyone on TikTok. But this is what I've figured out. Ben Stiller directed most of the episodes of Severance. And he actually discovered the script. I think it was just like a spec script. And he was like, we need to make this show. He's also directing the new Pickleball comedy. There's overlap here. And if this gets to somehow on Ben Stiller's desk, that would be fine. If anyone knows him, pass it along. But in Severance, which is extremely popular, very of the moment, there are a lot of religious undertones. A lot of people have said similarities between the Mormon church. Now, we also know that PPA has a lot of Mormon leadership and players. I'm just saying, I think there's an opportunity here for, instead of us having a pickleball movie that is pickleball meets dodgeball, we have pickleball meets Severance. It would be more unexpected. There's so many more places it can go. Little mystery, what is the same conflict that could be happening at a pickleball tournament that happens in Severance? How can we add a sci-fi element to this? How can we add some weird corruption, things like that? Big pickleball, you know what I mean? It's already there. It'll write itself. So Ben, if you get this, I don't need to be paid WGA scale or anything like that, but I'll do a consulting, just a consulting fee. Nothing crazy, but just a credit at the end, something like that. Anyway, back to pickleball. So this upcoming weekend, we have the Red Rock Open. I'm super excited, and I'm excited to be able to chat a little bit about an upcoming tournament. If you are excited for this weekend, as I am, it's important that you understand the history of the Red Rock Open. 2 years ago, one of my favorite tournaments of all time, I actually went back through some of my old videos to find the recap video that I made of this tournament. And it's so funny. First of all, I was a lot better at it then. My energy level's high. I'm just spouting facts and stats and, to be young. But I can't believe I've been doing that for over 2 years. You'd think I'd have more Instagram followers by now, but you know what? Quality, not quantity. Anyway, let's talk about it. 2 years ago, 2023, Red Rock Open. At the time, James Ignatowicz was the hot new thing in town. I know maybe nowadays it's hard to remember that because we don't talk about James Ignatowicz a lot anymore, but we used to talk about him all the time. So he had signed up for the year to play with Tyson, and they weren't having the results that he wanted. And it was kind of assumed again, since James was the superstar of the time, that it was Tyson's fault. This happens in partnerships in pickleball a lot. The better player will move on to someone else and then not have better results. Anyway, James leaves Tyson because Riley Newman needs a partner and he's going to play with Riley. And this was a thing, a big deal. These two top players, again, this is when Riley was number 2 man in the world. This is going to be an insane team. So what does Tyson do? It's literally last minute. He has no partner. He brings in Brendan Long. Brendan Long, been playing forever, but not a PPA player. This was before the whole too much about contracts. So it wasn't like necessarily like you had to be a PPA player like you have to be now. But like, we didn't talk about Brendan Long hardly at all. He'd been around forever, but wasn't meddling. Let's put it that way. So he comes to this tournament. Tyson and Brendan have to play James and Riley in like a truly iconic match. Truly. And Tyson and Brendan, against all odds, beat Riley and James. Honestly, like, I remember watching this and just being like floored. And I knew Brendan Long, but I wasn't like that familiar with him. And he does this thing where between every single point, he readjusts his hat. And like, you would think it would be annoying, but actually just like, I felt like I was getting readjusted before, like I was getting centered again before the next point. So I really appreciated that. And you had to cheer for them. You had to cheer for the underdogs. They ended up, that was just a semifinal. They ended up beating Deco Bar and Colin Johns in the finals. Ben wasn't playing that weekend. Colin was playing with Deco. That was supposed to be like a superstar. And then Tyson and Brendan beat them as well. What was funny about this is in the interview after Tyson and Brendan won, Tyson basically says, James dropped me. I had no partner, called up this superstar, and here we are. And again, truly iconic, but it gets better. At the time, the PPA was doing this thing where like all the players had graphics of like them, like their sponsors, all of these things. And they would be on Instagram, like showing them like coming to play. But Brendan didn't have one. So when he won gold, they didn't have a graphic to show for him. So he doodled himself on a piece of paper and posted it on his Instagram, like of his graphic. You guys, like if I just reminded you of that and you had forgotten, like you're welcome. That was a special time in pickleball. That was really special. People like to say, oh, that he won gold, but it was like a smaller field. I don't care if it was the smallest field in the entire universe. He still beat James and Riley. So like, that's legit. But this coming tournament, it's going to be the same situation. Less people. We don't have Ben Johns. We don't have Anna Bright. And that kind of makes a trickle-down effect of teams, less players than what we're used to seeing. So smaller brackets. But let's get into some of these teams because even though it's smaller, I kind of like it. And it forces us to have some mix-ups and partnerships and for us to get some new winners. So here, let's get into it. Men's singles. Same people we usually see. Will Christian Alshon three-peat? I mean, UConn men's basketball wasn't able to do it. So will Christian be able to do it? We'll see. But what I think is interesting here is Jaume Martinez-Vic has the 4 seed and QD has the 5 seed. Like, it is time for Kwang Duong to have another great tournament. He was poised to be at the top, and he's kind of trickled off in singles. And here's the question that it does pose. Can you be the best at singles and doubles? I think we used to assume that you could because of Ben Johns and Annalie Waters. But Annalie is an anomaly, so let's just take her out of it. And Ben hasn't doing that well in singles. And now that QD is focusing a lot on his doubles game, maybe that's the reason why he's not getting on the podium in singles. I don't know. But then you look at Fed and you're like, no, Fed's great at everything. Christian's great at everything. Okay, ignore everything I just said, but I hope that QD has a good weekend. Women's singles, Annalie's still in the draw, so I don't know really if anything else matters. But am I seeing this correctly that Lindsay Newman is playing singles? That's like best news. Unless there's another Elle Newman. I don't know if I haven't heard of one, so that's amazing. I also think it's interesting here that Jeannie Bouchard, the number 8 seed, has a bye, but the number 6 seed, Mary Brasha, doesn't. Honestly, like sometimes these brackets from the PPA just like truly make no sense to me. So there we are. I think Paris Todd, Catherine Parento singles match would be great in a quarterfinal. Anyway, lots of fun stuff there. Okay, mixed doubles. Mixed doubles. JW Johnson and Georgia Johnson have the number 1 seed. This is their weekend. Ben and Annalie aren't in the bracket. So I think a lot of people are going to be hungry to get themselves a gold medal. Paris is playing with Deckel. That's interesting. So it's interesting after a player has a big win, like Deckelbar had with Anna Bright, to see if I was to go then play Deckel, I'm like, okay, if Anna can do it, I can do it. We'll see. Christian and Catherine Parento back together. Hurricane Tyra Black is playing with James Ignatowicz. This is interesting because when Tyra first started playing, she drilled a lot with James. It's actually surprising that they haven't played more together, considering that they lived in the same place and they were drilling a lot together. So that could be a really dangerous team. And honestly, like James needs a big tournament. He needs a little push since he hasn't been really excelling since he stopped playing mixed doubles with one of the best females in the world, which is just saying that might have something to do with it. Federico Stakshu is playing with Etta Huinatoa. It is not only going to take me a while to like be able to say that name with confidence, but just not to call Etta right, because it rolls off the tongue so perfectly. So anyway, that'll be a really good partnership. Something I also have been thinking about a lot is Mary Brasha and Agiga. Mary plays right side with her sister Maggie. So it's interesting that there's a left side man who's playing with a right side. There's a right side man playing with a right side woman. It seems like a missed opportunity. Like that was a weird choice, I thought. Okay, men's doubles. Hayden Patrick-Quinn and Federico Stakshu back together. They are a very strong team, tons and tons of wins. I kind of just want them to like establish themselves and stay together. I love all the switching around between the partnerships. It's like fun, but at some point I'm ready for like teams to finalize themselves so we can get some real rivalries going, a la the Ben Johns, Colin Johns, Matt Wright, Riley Newman rivalry, when then J-Dub and Dylan started pushing themselves up and they took over the number 2 spot. I think if we keep Hayden and Fed together, maybe Christian and Andre and Ben and Gabe and J-Dub and CJ, those are 4 strong teams that could do a lot of damage. And then like, let's just get Pablo and Dylan together because they're besties and they're roommates and I want them to wear more headbands. That's what I'm looking for right there. So yeah, if anyone wants to send this to those boys so that they know who they should partner with, that would be great. A team, though, that we should watch out for this weekend, Riley Newman, Agiga. Riley has been hunting for his perfect men's doubles partners for what seems like 2 years now. Of course, because of the iconic life pickleball world altering breakup between him and Matt Wright that came on the heels of a lot of Facebook drama where Jim Kloss went on a tirade week after week about how Riley and Matt weren't beating Ben and Colin Johns because of Matt. And while I'm not disagreeing with that take, I find it to be an oversimplified take because we saw that after Riley and Matt, sorry, the cat is touching the tripod again. Hey. After Riley and Matt split, Matt kept making finals before Riley. So that was interesting. And again, it just goes back to my theory. Like if the quote unquote better player thinks that they need a better partner to beat these teams, it's like a self-fulfilling prophecy that it's not going to happen. But I love Augie. I'm a Riley fan. So I hope that this is going to be a really good team. It's actually funny because they're saying like left-handed men on the right side is the key to success. And even Augie himself on Instagram recently said that. And we're seeing that a lot with J-Dub and CJ. But J-Dub actually doesn't take that much court, even though he's a strong left side player. He never has. He's not like overly aggressive. So him playing with a lefty makes a lot of sense. But Riley's crazy. Like Riley's fully crazy. So I don't know if it matters that Augie's a lefty or not because Riley's going to be there anyway. We'll see. Women's doubles, Annalene Catherine. No Anna Bright. So Rachel Rohrbacher is playing with Paris Todd. That will be fun. And the reason that Paris and Tyra aren't playing together after their huge gold medal wins in last tournament is because Tyra's playing with Georgia. I love this partnership. You know that. And what I'm very excited about actually is the fashions for this tournament. Paris and Rachel. This is going to be very interesting because Rachel and Anna always match and look super cute, but I wouldn't say they're like fashion. Like they're not doing anything different. They're just like looking very like chic and clean and matching and cute. Whereas Paris and Tyra are always like upping their game. So I'm curious to see what Rachel and Paris are going to wear. And of course, like Georgia and Hurricane Tyra Black always have amazing outfits. I mean, they could have done like a fashion show of all of the different looks that they served in MLP, and I would have sat front row. Hurricane Tyra Black and Georgia Johnson with the number 3 seed, and Catherine Parento and Annalie Waters with the number 1. But for some reason, they're on the same side of the bracket. I absolutely detest when the PPA does this. I don't understand how you are not having the 4 seed on the same side as the bracket as the 1 seed. So we may not see a Tyra, Georgia, Paris, Rachel matchup, which would have been an amazing semifinal. But that doesn't mean there aren't other good teams over here on Paris and Rachel's side of the bracket. An interesting little matchup right here is Etta and Elise Jones could be coming up against Mari Humberg and Megan Dizon. What's interesting about this is Megan has partnered with both Elise and Etta. So that's interesting. That could be fun. I mean, honestly, though, now that I'm looking at this bracket, Lucy Kovalova and Leah Jansen, the number 5 seed, if they can make it to the quarters and play Paris and Rachel, that's going to be a lot of screaming. That's going to be high intensity match. I take back what I said. I am super duper excited for that quarterfinal if we get it. And yeah, there's honestly no better match than a late night, it's dark, end of the day, it's been a long day, Leia and Lucy. You don't know you don't even know what you're going to get. The emotions are going to be high. The energy is going to be high. It's going to be amazing. So that's what we're seeing here coming up in Red Rock. It's going to be a lot of fun. I'm very excited. Let's move on to some other things in the pickleball world. Something I want to talk about, and I was hesitant about always just wanting to open up conversations about things I hear on other podcasts, but I don't know. That's all I talk about anyway, so I might as well talk about it on this podcast. Jill Braverman, in her most recent podcast, talked a lot about the PPA reformatting the player contracts so that they can free up more money to have for prize money. And she is very much on this, I don't want to say soapbox, sounds negative, but like her messaging is the PPA is not a real tour if it's so insular and people are basically just playing for their appearance fees. And it's more just like a exhibition matches. There you go. And I agree with her. She's her prerogative. It benefits her to remind everyone of the pros for the APP as an APP player. Obviously, that is 100% what she should be doing. And she has made it clear that her and the PPA aren't best friends. She's not afraid to say things and not afraid to tweet things, not afraid to bring things up. I didn't have a podcast when this came out, but honestly, like the PPA going after Jill as hard as they do, everyone going after Jill as hard as they do is pretty funny. Like, it's always personal. It's always weird. I don't know. Anyway, that's neither here nor there. Let's get back on track. So Jill was talking about how they should free up money by redoing the player contracts and creating prize money. And essentially, they're going to go to the players and say, okay, we need to change your contract. Are you okay with that? And if you're not, like, essentially, we're not going to give you a new contract when this one's up. Okay. This is my thought on it. And I've talked to a couple people about that, and I feel like I'm in the minority. But I understand the idea that it's important to show that the players are playing for money, like that there are stakes at every tournament. And I do think something that is wrong with pickleball is that there are so many tournaments and they don't really necessarily all seem that important. Like, why should we care about this tournament? And yes, Jill said, and I agree, something that was great about MLP when it first started is they were like, the winner of this one weekend is going to get $100,000 split 4 ways. That's crazy. That's crazy money. So I do agree with that. But in execution, I don't actually know if it would benefit the game. So the reason why all these players are getting these contracts, I mean, this is the reason that they say, but who knows, is because now pickleball players can afford to be full-time pickleball players. They have guaranteed money that they can travel. They know that they can train, which will elevate the level of play and elevate the game. And we've even seen that, how much better people have gotten in the last 2 years. Look at Kate Fahey being able to quit her job and then become Kate Fahey. Rachel Rohrbacher, a ton of other players are coming onto the scene right now. And because of these contracts they signed with PPA, can be full-time athletes. If you take that away, if we take some money away from the bottom PPA players, we free up some money for all these people to create prize money. Essentially, we are just taking money from them to put into the hands of the same 10 people that win every week. This is going to make it harder for players to be full-time pickleball players and for them to train. And it is going to be harder for people to improve the sport. And again, I talked to some people about that who follow tennis a lot. And they're like, this isn't tennis. The same people are winning all the money in tennis. So many people are pro tennis players and they're not making any money. And it just is what it is. Like, that's just how sports work. I'm like, okay, I get that. But we are watching a pickleball tournament at 10 in the morning. And I'm watching one team pickle the other team. 11-0, 11-0. That's not fun. And taking the money away from like the mass amount of people to put into prize money that the top people are going to win week after week, especially when it comes to partnerships, is going to widen that gap. And while in the future, that's where the sport should go, maybe doing that right now is not going to help us get a lot more strong players. And I put it into MLP terms. Sure, who cares if the PPA has the same players winning? They would still be winning. And it is what it is. But now we have these MLP teams that we've extended to 6-player rosters. Looking at the teams, these 5 and 6 players, I don't know how many we're actually going to see play. Imagine a world where every team's a premier level team. And all 6 players are viable options to play. And suddenly we're subbing people in strategically, not just for injuries. And suddenly it benefits you to have a deep roster, just like on a basketball team. That would be amazing, but we need more good players. And do we get more good players if we're giving all of our money and prize money to the top? Now, my other point I made to these tennis lovers is that, like, when you're a baseball player, you aren't winning every game because you are going to get money for that game. Like, football players aren't playing for prize money. They're playing for better contracts. And I guess that was my argument. But I guess my argument instantly is, I can refute it back to myself, is that there's only one entity. So, like, they're trying to win better PPA contracts from the PPA. The PPA can just be like, no, we're not going to give you a better contract because there is no more tour wars. So basically, the PPA and MLP merging just kind of screwed all the players. They have no bargaining power whatsoever. So does it have to become a thing where they're making more money in their MLP teams? So see, I'm kind of just talking this out. So does PPA put more money in prize money? And then does somehow the MLP change so that teams are able to pay players different amounts of money. So for instance, if you are a player who was originally drafted for nothing and they drop you and then you get picked up for way more money, let's look at Kate Fahey, for example. Should she make more money now that she became a more valuable player? Maybe that's the solution to all of this. I don't know. And maybe I'm also biased because the last thing I want is for it to become even more difficult for someone to beat Annalie Waters. How? You guys, that's where I am on that. And then again, I really didn't want to get too in the weeds with talking about other podcasts. And I also just like in general don't enjoy talking about Jimmy Miller that much because I really go back and forth on my opinions about him. And I have been kind of turning another leaf and being like, okay, I'm going to like Jimmy. Lots of people like him. He's got a lot of fans. He's friends with the Kawamotos who like I'm a big fan of. So I'm like, they probably have good opinions about people. And recently, the fights, like the way he handles like the Twitter fights with Jim Kloss or like the one recently, I really respect it because like Jim Kloss, like, anyway, he recently on his podcast called out Travis Rettenmaier for some things that Travis said on his podcast about Anna Bright. And I felt very strongly when I listened to Travis's podcast where they're basically talking about like how popular Anna Bright is and that all, the boys on the PPA tour all love her and like, why is that? And they had things to say about why. And I was listening to in my car and I was like, are we joking right now? Is Travis really going to like talk about how Anna looks and also say like weird things about her sense of humor? It was all just odd. Like it would be very easy for someone to be like, oh, everyone likes Anna. Why is that? And I would just say, I mean, yeah, she's like really good at pickleball and really pretty and really funny. Period. Cat. Like that's so simple and complimentary and not creepy, but Travis didn't say that. So Jimmy on his podcast called out Travis for what he said. And I was like, okay, good. I'm not crazy because sometimes I do think I don't know if I'm overreacting with my feminism. I always come to the conclusion that I'm not. But in that moment, I was like, am I crazy that what he's saying is really inappropriate? But Jimmy said something. I was like, okay. Then this last King of the Court podcast, I even DM'd Jimmy and was like, thank you for saying that. Last King of the Court podcast, it's towards the end, has absolutely nothing to do with anything that's going on in their episode. Jimmy says, did you see what Annalie Waters tweeted to Ben? I'm not great at grammar, but she said, let's get it on Sunday. Let's get it on Sunday. Or let's get it on Sunday. I don't know. The point is, he was implying that she was coming onto Ben. And he said something like, can we say this now that she's 18? Like, is she 18? Are we saying this now? Like, how does Jackie feel about that? Jackie's Ben's girlfriend. No! Just because a calendar date came and Annalie turned 18 does not mean now we have to make weird, gross jokes about her. But what's the point of that joke? It wasn't even funny, and she's still a teenager. Even this whole idea of like 18, like, oh, we had the jokes in our head about her, but now that she's 18, we can say them? What? But why? Like, that's my question. Like, why was that comment inserted? Okay. So that's just my little rant about that. I mean, you literally are a GM of MLP, a GM. Essentially, it won't happen, obviously, the way that the teams are shaking out, but essentially you could one day have Annalie Waters on your team. And this is what you're saying about her on your podcast. Anyway, so that's another episode for you guys. Thank you guys so much for listening. Please follow me on Instagram, Obsessed with Pickleball. I hope you have a wonderful week. I hope you get to watch some pickleball. I hope you get to play some pickleball, and I hope you get to talk about some pickleball. See you later.